Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. Like Dan said, I'm Kevin. I am the Technical Director here at IRIS. And today I'm going to walk you through a couple of our reports, talk a little bit about what IRIS is, and then field any questions that you might have. If we have time, we'll squeeze in some use cases. This is a pretty open forum, so don't hesitate to interrupt. I always like to answer questions. So let's get started. Alrighty, there we go. Okay, so we're going to cover a couple things. What is IRIS? Then we're going to take a look at the IRIS spending report. I'll explain that a little bit. And then we'll jump into a supplemental report that supports it. It's our Congressional District fact sheet that we just updated and released, I want to say about a week ago, with all the new rep names and things like that post-election. And then any questions or discussions at the end that we haven't been able to cover during the presentation. So let me go over really quick for those of you who aren't IRIS members or aren't familiar with what IRIS is. What is IRIS and what do we do? So IRIS, the Institute for Research on Innovation and Science, is an IRB approved data repository that's been set up at the University of Michigan. What we do is we collect data from member universities. So IRIS is made up of a series of university members, a consortium of members that all provide administrative data to IRIS in order to clean it, process it, normalize it, and turn it into reports and data sets and things like that that help our members explain the value of scientific research that is being conducted on America's campuses. So the chief director here at IRIS, Jason Owen Smith, often says that there's a challenge in explaining to the public what is the value of the money that's being spent on scientific research. What does the public get from that? And so IRIS was created to try to help answer that question for all of our members and even non-members. We do a lot of op-eds and different things with the federal government and stuff, advocating for the value of that research. So right now, we have 36 active university members, and they run all across the country. The data that we maintain represents roughly 40% of all federal R&D spending, 30% of all doctorates that are granted. And at any given time right now, we have, I want to say 120 active researchers that are utilizing our data, and 240 researchers that have utilized our data from across 83 different institutions to write papers and to try to use our data to answer valuable scientific questions that they've presented. What we do is we take this data that's provided by our members, and once we've normalized it and cleaned it and created different linking assets for it, we connect that data with a variety of other sources. So one of our data partners is the US Census Bureau. We connect data with that, and we're able to pull out important metrics regarding the national impact of scientific research. That's a really good partnership there. We also pull in information from private sector companies such as Bureau van Dijk, which is a subsidiary of Moody's. They provide a wide range of business data for us to use. We also use data from Stepping Blocks. They provide outcomes data on individuals, so we can report on the impact of research-trained professionals that enter the private sector, leave their universities where they've been trained on research. What happens to them? What do they do? What kind of impacts do they make on the economy? And then a variety of other public sector sources, the NIH, the NSF, places like that. We try to pull down that data, link it with our data, and derive some important and useful metrics from that we then provide back to our members. So just to give you a little idea of how the process works, This diagram right here is just a really quick generalization of the types of data that we receive and then how we use it. So in this example right here, an award is paid to a university from the National Science Foundation, and that money is then used to conduct research on the campus. That research is performed by individuals, so there's jobs and salaries being paid from that. There are also purchases being made, vendor purchases, so computer equipment, microscopes, cages, things like that are purchased to conduct this research. And then there are also subcontracts that can be subcontracted out to other organizations. So University A subcontracts a portion of the research out to University B, and we're able to track all of that information and compile it and put it together in some meaningful reports that allow a university then to discuss the impact of this scientific research that's being conducted. This is just a quick visual overview of some of the things that we provide. We provide metrics on the employees, the individuals, the researchers that are conducting this research on America's campuses. We look at their outcomes when they leave, how much they're earning, where they go, things like that. We look at their team compositions. Who are these people that are doing the research? Where do they come from? What are their genders? What are their levels of education, things like that. We look at the economic impact of the vendor and subcontract spending. In many cases, a university, and I'll use University of Michigan as the example here, doesn't just spend money in the county that it's located. It doesn't just spend money in the state that it's located. It spends money all across the country, and it's useful to be able to identify those locations and talk a little bit about how that money is flowing there, why that money is flowing there, and what kind of impact that makes. We're also able to look at the industries that are directly affected by their relationships with these universities and how that impacts not only the amount of money that they take in, but the number of people that they're able to employ and the types of, and the salaries that they're able to pay their employees through these relationships. And then we also look at success metrics for different programs. We have a special report that looks at the outcomes and produces success metrics on KL2 scholars, which is part of a CTSA program on the medical side of universities. And so we're able to track their progress in a variety of different categories. And then we put that all into visualizations and hopefully easy to understand reports that people can access easily and utilize and share and talk about these things. So let me jump into the actual reports here, and then we can talk a little bit about this stuff. So the report that I'm going to present today, it's sort of our overview report of the impact of scientific research for a particular university. So today I'm going to be utilizing University of Michigan's impact report here. We call this the spending report. Another way to think of it is sort of a comprehensive impact report on the purchasing of products and services that go into scientific research, as well as an overview of the people who participate in that research. So I'll start out here. I'll sort of walk through this report. Again, any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and talk to me about it. I would love to answer them. So the report here can be configured in a variety of different ways. I'm only focusing on the most recently closed fiscal year. And in this case, I'm going to be looking at both federal and non-federal research funding. So we all know that there's a lot of federal funding, the NIH, the NSF, agencies like that. There are also a lot of non-federal funding sources, foundations, private sector businesses, nonprofits, et cetera. So in this report, we aggregate all of that data together to present some quick visualizations that can be used to talk about the impact of this scientific research. So the first thing we look at here are the impact on people. So what types of people are being employed to conduct this research on U of M's campus. So we see there's faculty, there's grad students, there's staff. You can see how many of these people there are, how many are undergrads. And the interactivity built into this report also lets you drill down and look at the types of people and their job titles that they conduct here. So you can drill down and you can see a variety of information on these individuals. At the same time, in the second chart here, we look at the funding sources that provide the salary, the money to pay for these individuals, and we rank them. We put the top 8 here. So you can see here at U of M, NIH is the #1 supporter of the staff, the personnel, the employees that are conducting the scientific research. And we break down into categories here so you can see how much of that support is going to different groups. So you can see, the faculty here, and it breaks down percentages. You can also change the order if you want to be able to line these up. And then, of course, you can extract these visuals and put them into PowerPoint presentations and things like that. So if you look down the list here, you can see, because this is a mix of federal and non-federal funding sources, NIH is #1, but nonprofits are #2. We move on down, we have for-profits. So that would be private sector businesses, things like that, so on and so forth. The unknown category are non-federal sources that have not been completely identified yet. We don't know if they're for-profit or not. We're working on that to minimize that category as much as possible. But we do try to include everything so we don't cut it out of the reporting. In addition, on this first page, we also look at the impact of spending. So when I say spending, what I'm referring to specifically is vendor purchases or subaward contracts that are spread, as you can see, across the country. There are, of course, hotspots, it's obvious, but you can also drill down into these maps and identify particular counties and who the top vendors are. Go ahead, Dan.
Kevin, we have a couple questions.
Sure.
One question is, given the link to the census data, do you have gender and race information for individuals paid by research awards?
Right, so we actually have 2 data providers that provide these types of metrics. So there is the Census Bureau, but we are limited in our ability to use that data because of disclosure rules. So although we can see gender and we can see ethnicity, we right now don't provide that in a report to our members. We do pull out information from the Census Bureau at a higher level that does talk about the impact of the research that's being conducted on an individual basis. But right now we don't pull that information out of the census. But what we do is we have a relationship with Stepping Blocks, which provides parallel types of data on the outcomes of individuals, and they do have gender information. And so we do have that information in an upcoming report that we're putting together. We have an employee report and a variety of other reports. So yes, we do have that info, but it's not coming from the Census Bureau, it's coming from Stepping Blocks. And in the near future, we should be able to include ethnicity metrics in that as well.
Another question, what is the definition of support for a person on a research grant? Is it, the questionnaire asks, is it something like more than 200 hours in a year?
Nope.
Or do we stick to that?
So we're basically, when we talk about individuals that are supported by research grants, we're talking about anybody that receives a payment, a salary payment, that can be traced back to a funded award. So this could be a student that's working part-time. This could be a faculty member. This could be a staff member like myself. There is no lower limit on how many hours that they have to work on a particular award to be represented in the data. Now, I will say that we have data sets that are available to researchers, that are available to faculty, and that are available particularly to our member institutions, where they could dig into those details and find out more information. And I'd be happy to talk about that at another time. You could always email us if you're interested in accessing that level of data, because we generally don't put that level of nuance into the reports. Any other questions, Dan?
Not at the moment.
Okay, great. So back to the vendor and subaward purchases. So as we all know, universities report, I shouldn't say as we all know, as many of us know, universities report their research portfolio to places like HERD. So we get dollar amounts for how much is being spent on America's campuses through that. This looks at a subset of that money and really focuses in on how money flows from funding agencies to universities and then out into the economy to businesses and organizations that provide the necessary material and support to continue and conduct this research. So again, with these maps, we try to visualize the flow of that money and the quantity of that money that flows out to different counties and states across the country. We do it at the national level and at your state level. So when I say your state level, the state that your home university is in. So in this case, we're seeing Michigan. And then we also identify who are the top recipients of that funding in these different counties and how much they've received. And again, this data can be all customized. There's a customization page on the front of this report that allows you to look at this over several years. You can filter out federal funding or non-federal funding. You can really zero in on the types of information that's presented in this report here. So you can see the dollar amounts and things like that. We break it down. You can zoom in. You can look at particular counties. And, if we mouse over one here, you can see some information. Now, one of the interesting questions is, okay, so we see this Meadowlark Optics Incorporated received funding in Weld County, Colorado. If you're curious what they're doing, we have another tool called the Impact Finder, which you could actually drill down and see what kinds of research are taking place in Weld County and what types of purchases were made with this Meadowlark Optics. And then that can be used to tell very interesting stories, very interesting impact stories about research. So there's a large suite of different tools here that IRIS provides beyond just these reports. Now, in addition to this overview, we also provide some congressional district information. This basically shows vendor and subaward spending at the congressional district level. Similar to the previous map that we just looked at, designated in different ways to fit different geography. Now, we do have a supplemental report that I'll show you right after this one that digs more deeply into the impact of these different congressional districts and focuses in particular on home districts of universities. And then this report also provides benchmarking. So this is something that every member wants. They want benchmarking. They want to be able to compare themselves against their peer groups. So in this case, the peer group that I've designated, you can see the names of the peer group universities here. Basically, I just grabbed a bunch of them that are IRIS members. So this isn't a very refined peer group, but if you were using this report yourself, you could refine your peer group more appropriately. But what we like to do here is we like to sort of compare the types of employees, the types of spending to this peer group. And we're talking about expanding the benchmarking into a lot of different areas. So that's something that will probably come in the future. But some of the things that we look at here is how does the concentration of employees at your particular university affect or compare to your peer group? So in this case, you can see the University of Michigan, 17.9% of their employees are faculty, whereas in the peer group, it's 18.9, with a 5.9 standard deviation. And so we look at this here, different categories. Ones that are highlighted is because they exceed the standard deviation by 1 or 2 magnitudes here. Red ones are 2 standard deviations away from the mean. Orange ones are 1 standard deviation. So it just lets you see how your research employees compare to the peer group. And then down here, we also look at spending. In-state spending is one that's always of interest. So of all the universities in comparison here, where does the University of Michigan fall when it comes to spending money in the home state? So you can see, right around, let's see, it tells us here in a number. I can't quite find it here off the top of my head. But anyway, looks like it's about 38% of the money that U of M spends on vendor purchases and subaward contracts stays within the state of Michigan. That's, I think, particularly relevant to public universities. It's always a nice benchmark to talk about, especially compared to the peer groups here. Originally, this benchmark page was designed to help test the quality of the data, but people liked it so much that we left it in for this purpose. And we've been talking about expanding on it ever since. So in addition to all the different metrics that we provide in this report, we also provide a variety of tools that you can use to create your own reports. So one of the things that you can do is download all the underlying data that drives these charts. You could then take that and load it into Tableau or load it into a database, use R to generate your own visualizations, things like that. You can also easily share this report. So a lot of the reports that we produce, you need to log in to a portal to access it. That's a security measure. But if you want to be able to share this report with people outside of your university or within your university, you can just click on this link here. It limits the ability of someone to use the report. They can't download data. They can't generate new reports with it, but they can view what you allow them to view. It's a nice way to share information. You can also download reports as a PDF. So if you have somebody that you want to just hand it to instead of asking them to go online and look at that, you can do that. All of our reports are designed for a nice, clean PDF format.
A question, Kevin.
Yes.
Questioner asks, are you able to disaggregate within schools by department, medical schools, dental schools, for example, across schools at all universities?
Yeah, so that's a great question because we were just talking about that today. So we do have the data to do that. We haven't done it yet, but we were just talking today about adding that feature to this report or making a similar report that would allow you to provide these exact same metrics, but at a departmental level, school level, college level, within a university, and then even break it up. So U of M has 3 different campuses. There's the Ann Arbor, the Flint, and the Dearborn campus. So you could also break it up that way. That is definitely a feature that is coming in our reports, but we haven't deployed it yet. Now, I will say, again, if you were interested, you could definitely gain access to your university's data and see these metrics without the visuals. So it would be raw data in spreadsheets, basically, but you could see it broken down at these different, we call them sub-organization units, if you were interested in that. Any other questions, Dan? No? Okay. Okay, so that was the lightning talk on this particular report, the spending report. Now, one of the things that I'm going to jump into, I had mentioned when we looked at the congressional district component of it, that we have a supplemental report, and we'll take a look at that really quick. So IRIS has been getting more and more involved with government relations officers and individuals at our member universities. They've found that our data sets and our ability to customize data for them to be particularly useful in their discussions with congressional staffers and others. So we started to produce reports that were specific to their needs. And this is the first one that we had put together. This is called the Congressional Fact Sheet. So we designed this so it could be easily printed and handed to a congressional staffer with no effort. So we have a front page that has some very quick highlights regarding funding agencies, the number of employees that are supported from that. At the federal level, we also have some metrics that we provide in here about the employees that leave the university but stay in the home state. So you can see here that 25% of all research trained employees, so again, this is faculty, this is students, this is staff, stay in the state of Michigan. And on average, when they do find jobs, they get, 85.4 per year. We also look at top industries as far as the employees, once they leave, where they are going in terms of industries and how much they're earning on average in those industries. Then we dig into individual districts here. So we provide a high-level spending, some dollar amounts here by each district. So you can see we provide the most recent fiscal year, so FY 2020, and then a 5-year aggregate for that information. And you can see how much money is spent in each district. We've got some nice maps. And so we're working on another report that's going to dig in more deeply into individual districts with a lot more interesting metrics in addition to the spending. We also provide a report at the state legislative level, so not just at the federal level. It has very similar information in the top, but it provides a completely different breakdown at the state legislative district level. So you can always use that in discussions with them. And then, like I said, we have a variety of other reports that we produce that can all be used to supplement information. So if there's no questions, I'm going to jump into some use cases here. Okay.
There's one question. Can you talk about who is able to access the interactive versions of these reports?
Sure.
There's a question from a participant from Cal State Monterey Bay, which I don't believe is a member.
Correct.
So can you talk about how to access these reports?
Yep, absolutely. So the reports that we produce are produced for IRIS members. And so once a university becomes an IRIS member, they gain access to the secure portal that we produce, and then they can log in and view all the reports that we produce. They can also share that with people outside their university. And there is no limit to the number of individuals within a university that can access these reports and this data. We leave that up to the universities to decide how to best disseminate that information. Now, for non-members, we do produce a variety of aggregate reports that we do put out on our public-facing webpage. And then we also produce different things for different uses. So on a fairly regular basis, we produce aggregate reports that we then use for op-eds and different governmental purposes. Some of our, I'm drawing a blank, university associations like AAU get aggregate versions of reports for their members that are also IRIS members. So there's a variety of different ways to access the data. If you want access to some of this information, feel free to reach out to us, shoot us an email, and we can figure out how to make it work. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, so let's talk about use cases. Reports are only as useful as you use them, I guess. So there's a variety of use cases that we've seen, some of them internal, some of them external. So in terms of internal use cases, we've seen this information used in annual reports and things like that by offices of research on our member campuses when they're presenting the value and impact of research that they've conducted for the year, say to their board of trustees or things like that. On an external basis, we see press releases. So here's one from Northwestern. This is derived from one of our other reports. This is derived from something we call the vendor impact report, where we focus on the impact of vendor purchases to businesses, but we try to zero in on things like minority or female-owned businesses, small businesses, things like that, ones that our members would like to showcase and talk more about. So here's another one from the University of Michigan, press release that they used our data in. And so this is one of the main use cases here that we see. And again, if you think about what the mission of IRIS is, it is to help convey the value of scientific research to the public in a way that they'll understand. And so that's why we've been trying to frame everything in an easily digestible format that anyone can take and use to explain the impact of that research. And one of the things that we provide along with the reports are templates for press releases that you just fill in the information. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, do we pre-fill this in for them? Or do we provide the template and then they fill it in?
They fill it in themselves using the data that they find most important or relevant to their communications goals at the moment.
Right, okay, perfect. So we try to provide tools to you, not just informational tools that you can use to explain the impact of research, but also tools to disseminate that information in a very easy and quick way.
Quick
And
question.
then, yes.
Let me interrupt.
Yes.
There is a question from Baron Wolf at University of Kentucky.
Oh, hey, Baron.
He asks, when he was presenting IRIS to various people at his university, there was some concern about whether and how our data may be different from the data that the university's purchasing department already collects.
Yep.
Is it different and how?
Okay, so it can be different. And so one of the first things that we do, particularly with new members that join us, is we put their data through a vetting process on both sides. So when you first join up with IRIS, Baron, you send that first tranche of data over to us. We put it through a variety of checks on our side, but then we produce some preliminary reports, and we feed those back to you, not to everyone at your university, to give you and your data people an opportunity to vet that information and make sure that it aligns as accurately as possible with your expectations and with the departments on your campus. There is often some discrepancy between what we report and what the expectations are on your campus, and that can almost always be identified and explained. So a very common thing is classified research. So if you think about your research portfolio at your university, you may not communicate to IRIS classified research that's taking place on your campus. So Department of Defense research or something like that. You have the right to decide what research you share with IRIS. So if you don't want to share that, that's fine. All we ask is that you let us know that, hey, we're not going to include DoD research. The numbers that IRIS reports is going to be a little different than what we expect because that is not part of the full portfolio. And then as long as that caveat is out there, that usually resolves any questions about it. The other thing that we try to do too is stress that the reports that we produce are often a subset of the overall research portfolio. So when you think about the numbers that are reported to HERD or things like that, that's sort of the total package right there. But we try to focus less on the total package because you already know that, and more on the more nuanced aspects of research spending. So how is your research portfolio affecting businesses? How is that vendor purchasing affecting the economy in your local area, in your state, at the national level? And then also we look at the impact of the individuals. So how is all this research on your campus impacting people when they go out and about? So we try to identify other metrics that help explain the value of the scientific research that's being conducted on campuses, above and beyond what you're already used to talking about. Does that help? Okay, any other questions? Baron, I'll be calling you soon. No other questions?
I have a question from me.
Okay.
Can you show an example of the spending report that shows multiple years of
Yeah.
data? Because
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that shows another dimension of what you can do with this.
Sure, absolutely. So let me. So what you can do is click on New Report. I clicked on it quickly up here, and then you just select the year range that you're interested in. So let's just do a 3-year range from 2018 to 2020. We can include or exclude work study. We can focus, let's just do federal. Let's only look at federally funded awards. And then we can set a benchmark year. So we're going to benchmark against the most recent fiscal year. And then we can define what the peer group is that we're benchmarking against. I'm not going to change any of that. That's fine. And then once I submit that information, it generates the report here for us. So it changes the metrics all the way around. And you can see over 3 years, $786 million in vendor purchases and subcontracts. Now, we do have a lot of other data that we could be building metrics on. And so we'll be looking at a redesign of this particular report in the future, where we include maybe total portfolio. We can even start breaking down information about individuals that are PIs and the teams and the publications and all that kind of stuff. We do collect all that information as well. So there's a variety of other metrics that we could pop in here if it's relevant. And so I'll say then, there are committees made up of university members that advise us on what the next reports should be, what they need on their campus, and what changes we should make to existing reports. We meet on a regular basis, and they have a lot of input on the development of what's presented by IRIS. So none of this stuff is developed in a vacuum by us. It's always developed in collaboration with our existing members. Was there anything in particular, Dan, you'd like me to focus on?
No, I just wanted people to see that you can compare years, you can sum the years that
Yep.
data available for.
Yep. Yep.
And that's just another dimension of what we have.
That's right.
So I'm sorry to mess up your flow. So just continue with where you were.
No, I don't have a flow, so that's all good.
That's not true.
Okay, so one other thing here. So here's a PDF of one of the congressional fact sheets. Again, it prints very cleanly. This is all pre-designed by us to get perfect printing. So it makes it easy to hand out and share with people. Okay, so that's everything that I have. If anybody has any questions, now's a great time. I'd love to hear them. And if anybody wants to know anything else about IRIS or the other reports that we produce, or the research data set that we make available to researchers, I'd be happy to talk about that as well.
Can you talk a little more about the state version of the congressional fact sheet?
Yeah. So the state legislative fact sheet, it's really tricky to build because state legislative districts are not as well defined. data-wise as congressional districts are. So it's a fun one to work with. We're actually doing the refresh right now. So this is the refreshed report for University of Michigan. So all the rep names and everything are up to date, given the most recent election. But we'll be rolling this out for all of our members very soon with their refreshed data. Basically, it looks again at the vendor and subaward spending, but at your home state legislative district level. For states that have, well, almost all the states have a House of Representatives and their own Senate. You see two different sets of information here. You can scroll through the information to find out particular districts that you're interested in, pull that information out. And then again, you can always download the underlying data. So I think a lot of our friends in the government relations offices like to just grab that data as a spreadsheet and then feed it into whatever talking points they're putting together for their presentations.
Okay, question on this.
Yes.
Is there anything at this level about topic of research or funding agency? I think the answer is no, but there's another report that does that, right?
So I'm trying to think at the geographic level, topics of research. Is that what we're getting at?
The impact finder does that, right?
The impact finder does that, but it does it based on vendor locations within a given state. So you can, so one of the tools that we have, it's called the impact finder, and what it allows you to do is identify a geographic region within whatever state you're interested in, and then it lets you drill down and see the kinds of impact you're making at a local level within that geographic region. And then not only the impact, so the spending and the businesses and things like that, but you can also learn about the types of research that are taking place there. What are the funded research projects that are being done, you know, in a particular county or a particular city? And then who are the PIs on that? Who are the funding agencies? What kinds of research are they doing? What types of papers have been produced out of that? That kind of information.
Yeah, so we've got that set up by county, but not by state legislative district at the moment.
Right, yeah, so exactly. So you can drill down at the county level, but you do have nice little maps. So if you know the outline of your state legislative district, you could identify the research in a particular place. But I don't think it'd be a heavy lift for us to add additional geographic polygons to the reports. So
Another question just came
Yeah.
up. Is there a breakdown of the spending reports by minority-owned business or by geographic population density?
So there is a breakdown of spending by minority-owned businesses as well as small businesses and woman-owned, female-owned businesses. That's in a different report that we have called the vendor report. That one goes into a lot more detail regarding the business relationships that our members have with vendors and subcontractees. Again, the spending report is sort of a higher level overview of everything. We have a variety of other reports that get really down into the nuanced levels of reporting.
Don't see any other questions right at the moment, unless I'm
Okay.
missing any.
Okay. So if anybody's ever interested, I'm happy to do this for a private group. Just let Iris know. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us. I really appreciate it. I always